let's just jump into it. Let's talk about just in general. If nobody here knows anything about your book or yourself, tell us a little bit about Farewell, Dorothy Parker.
I wanted this to be able to have an arc that Dorothy Parker could sort of be her mentor and help her through something. So the main character that I came up with is named Violet, and she's a movie critic. And in many ways, she's the opposite of Dorothy Parker because she's so timid, she can't get anything out. She has a lot of social phobia, and she can't bring her inner bitch to the light, as you will. So the ghost of Dorothy Parker winds up hitching a ride onto her life, moves into her home, and becomes her mentor and in some ways her tormentor. And the whole idea of the book is for Violet to have this outer journey because there were things she has and things she needs to accomplish in life, but also have this inner journey that Dorothy Parker helps her with, where she helps her find her voice. And it was also important for me to let Dorothy Parker have an arc in the book as well. So she goes on a journey too. So that's sort of the basic concept behind the book.
Did you consider any other character besides Dorothy Parker for the book? I mean, Farewell, Lillian Hellman wouldn't have really rolled off the tongue, would it?
Yeah, no, the reason that it was Dorothy Parker was because I'm such a fan of her short stories, her poetry, her essays, her letters, and I'm so intrigued by life and her wit and the way she was able to find humor despite all the darkness in her life. So, and not only that, I mean, in many ways, she was the voice I've carried around on my shoulder my whole life, making these snarky remarks about my life and my choices in this crazy modern world. So to me, it was a natural. In fact, when I got the idea to resurrect her as a character, it was about the most exciting fiction idea I'd ever had. And I was just, thrilled to start writing these scenes and bring Dorothy Parker to life. And for me, writing is a very auditory experience, and I went into this believing that because I knew Dorothy Parker's voice so well, that I would be able to put her in the scenes and just hear her speak. But what I learned from writing it, and I always appreciated her economy of words, but I didn't appreciate it as much until I started writing the book and realized how carefully I had to hone absolutely every single line that she uttered to make it sound. It was a great lesson for me because I think that I'm a pretty economical writer, but Dorothy Parker made me realize that there's always more that you can cut, and there are ways to just get it honed finer and finer and finer and finer. So it was a learning experience. It was frustrating. It was wonderful. I'm looking forward to doing it again. Writing Dorothy Parker as another character. But it was from start to finish, it was an interesting experience, an amazing experience, and I was really, thrilled to publish the book.
How did you get into writing in her voice? Try to get into her head.
Yeah, that's a good question because, of course, the first thing I did was, reread a lot of her writing. I also reread several biographies. I mean, some were new, some I had read in the past, but I went through everything again, so I, got more of a sense of her life, which, like I said, I mean, it was always with me, but I read these biographies many years ago, so I reread them, and of course I reread her fiction and her poems, but in order to really capture her voice, the important thing for me was her essays and her letters, because it's where Dorothy Parker's actual voice comes through. And the more I read those, I felt I got a sense of who she was and how she really sounded. So it was, not her fiction and not her poetry so much that helped me really nail her voice, but, God Bless Marion Mead and the Portable Dorothy Parker, because there were all sorts of pieces in the back of that book that were Dorothy Parker's essays and letters, and they were absolutely terrific in helping me capture her voice.
Would you say that you're more of a fan of her poetry? I think, on my site, dorothyparker.com, it's pretty evenly split down the middle of people that are fans of the poems or the short stories.
Yeah, I would say it's probably evenly split for me too, and it probably always was evenly split. And one of the things that happened to me in researching this book was that instead of it being split two ways between the poems and the stories, it became split three ways between the poems, the stories, and the nonfiction as well, the essays, because I came to appreciate how absolutely magnificent her writing was when she was trying to get a nonfiction point across. How succinctly she could do it and how brilliantly she could do it and how much she could get across with very few words, and how truly astounding her wit was. Not just, reading it and laughing and enjoying it, but then when I had to recreate that in the book, I appreciated it about 1,000 times more because I understood how really difficult it is to craft the kind of wit that was, clearly so natural to her.
Ellen, do you think there's a rise? And the reason I ask is, with Gatsby coming out in theaters tomorrow, I'm seeing an uptick in interest in Dorothy Parker lately. Do you think that'll have a trickle-down effect onto your book and your audience?
Well, I certainly hope so, and I absolutely see it too. I mean, it almost seems like there's an explosion of interest in the 1920s very suddenly. I think Gatsby has a little bit to do with it, but there have been a few other books as well that have come out lately. A few other popular novels that are dealing with the 1920s. So I think people are really fascinated by this era, by this pre-Depression era, in such a time of significant change, a significant cultural shift. It was a fascinating time in American history. And yeah, I think people are more interested in it than they were. And if it brings them to my book, I'll be thrilled. I always like to have more readers, and I like to introduce more people to Dorothy Parker. One of the things that's been a thrill to me, I mean, yes, I have had a lot of Dorothy Parker fans read the book and write to me, but I also have heard from a lot of people who said they weren't familiar with Dorothy Parker, or kind of knew the name and weren't quite sure who she was, and then after they read the book, they went out and reading Dorothy Parker. And that's a singular thrill. I love the idea that I can, introduce her to some new people, maybe introduce her to a new generation. I think it's wonderful.
I agree with you. I think that's the main reason for the Dorothy Parker Society, and one of the things I see with the new edition of my book, Journey to Dorothy Parker's New York, and I'm doing a cocktail book on Dorothy Parker's drink recipes. I think that there's a big upswing in interest in the 20s, partially from Boardwalk Empire and Downton Abbey, but I think people that like the books, they're also going to like dressing up and going to parties, and so I think it all fits in really nicely. Tell us a little bit more of what's next. You said that you're doing another follow-up. You have a follow-up to the book?
Yeah, that was a tremendous thrill for me because I actually had this idea, not a fully formed idea, but this little concept sort of floating around in the back of my mind about resurrecting her again. I mean, she's such a wonderful character, and I really did enjoy bringing her to life so much. So this idea about that for a story that really, I don't want to give too much, it's really in the embryonic stages right now, but I was seeing her in the Algonquin, and I did have this idea of bringing her back to life with a whole different cast of characters. And this was in the back of my mind, and then my publisher actually contacted me and said, what would you think about, bringing Dorothy Parker back to life again for another book? And I said, fantastic. That's, it's actually been on my mind. So, yeah, so it was great to just take this sort of little germ of an idea that was, floating around there. And I've been working very hard, doing my wee hours of the morning writing, which is when I'm at my most creative, getting up at 5 a.m. and working on this brand new book with Dorothy Parker's ghost being resurrected in the Algonquin Hotel. But there's another character who's kind of so different from Violet, who was very shy and retiring. The man in this book is going to be Dorothy Parker's foil, and it's, she's kind of met her match here. So here's somebody who's sort of as outrageous as she is, but in different ways. So I'm to do that. It's going to be another couple of years before it's on the shelves, but it'll be occupying my life for a while now.
Well, I just had coffee at Algonquin this morning, and I can report the coffee is still fantastic, and the lobby was very crowded. They're doing a gangbuster business there. Do you want to throw it open to some questions from the room now?
I would love to take some questions from the room. I think we need somebody from Shindig, the tech end, to step in here. I'm just going to come.
Hello there. Hello there.
So if anybody has any questions, hi.
Hey,
Do you have any questions from the group or questions for you to read?
Hi there. Yes, so just a reminder to everyone that if you'd like to ask your question via video, you can click the raise hand button in the bottom right-hand corner.
Hi, Tom.
And if you'd like to ask your question via text, you can do so by clicking the ask a question button in the bottom right-hand corner. So we have one question here already in the queue. Ellen, how did you and Kevin meet each other? The audience member wants to know.
I met Kevin because I joined the Dorothy Parker Society, and he was the president of the Dorothy Parker Society. So I reached out to him. I was very curious to know him, and I'd read his wonderful Dorothy Parker book, which is a nonfiction book about Dorothy Parker's New York. And I really highly recommend it. It's full of really wonderful tidbits. It's really a joy of a book. So I really highly recommend that to anybody who's interested in Dorothy Parker, whether you're a New Yorker or not. It's a great volume. So yeah. So Kevin's is a historian and an author, and an expert on Dorothy Parker. It was great to see him.
That's great to hear. So Mary has a question from the audience here.
And I can keep on talking while we wait for more questions.
And she says, do you have a title for the new Dorothy Parker book yet?
Okay.
Do you have a new title for the new Dorothy Parker book?
I don't have a title yet for the new book. That's going to be a while. Yeah, I don't have a title yet for the new book. Sometimes titles come to you right away, the right title, and sometimes it takes a while. Farewell, Dorothy Parker. For that one, my husband actually helped me with it, because I was thinking, what am I going to call this book? Hello, Dorothy Parker. Goodbye, Dorothy Parker. I knew neither of those worked, and he said, Farewell, Dorothy Parker. And I said, that's it. That's great. So maybe he can help me with the next one too. It's a little tricky to put somebody's name in a title, because you don't want it to start to sound like a Nancy Drew mystery, Dorothy Parker and something something. So it's a little tricky, but we'll come.
Sounds good. The next question is titled Modern Dorothy Parker. And is there anyone today who you would draw a close comparison to Dorothy Parker?
People ask that question. Dorothy Parker is so unique. I'm not really sure we have a modern Dorothy Parker. Probably the closest one would be Fran Lebowitz, who's so original and such an incredible wit, and a true she's probably the one that I would consider closest in the modern world. And she's brilliant, and I'd love to read something new by her one day.
That's great. I'll have to check her out. The next question is on writing process here. And so it says, as a fellow writer, I'm always curious about other writers' process when writing. What is your daily writing process?
Yeah, I started to allude to that before. process. I just want to make it clear that whatever works for you is the right process for you. So there's not one right or one wrong way to work. When my children were small and I first started my career as a novelist, the only time I had to write was 5 o'clock in the morning when the family was still asleep. So I got in the habit of getting up, very, very early and writing in those wee hours. And even though my kids are, older now, and I don't really have, I can write during the day. I got in the habit of using those wee hours of the morning, and it's stuck with me. It's a fantastic night. It's when I'm my most creative. Granted, I have to have that cup of coffee or two first, but the writer Alice Hoffman once spoke about writing in those wee hours, and she thinks that it's because we're closer to sleep and closer to our subconscious mind, which is where we're so creative. And I think there might be really something to that. So yeah, my writing routine does involve getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and getting some work done really, really early. That's absolutely when I'm most creative. I cannot write it all at night. That's my biorhythms. That's the way it works for me. First start to get creative at 11 o'clock at night. As far as how I write my novels, because people always ask, do I outline? I do outline in a way. I create a 3-act structure for all my books, but it's a very fluid document. It's a very organic document. So I try to understand before I start where the climax is going to be, what big turning points are going to be in the novels, what the main character's arc is going to be. So all that is laid out. And then as I go along, I understand that sometimes you have to change the story. Sometimes characters don't behave in the way you think they're going to behave. When you get to a certain scene, you realize that they won't say or do what you would originally thought they would. Of course you could force them, but then it wouldn't be natural. So with that in mind, I consider the outline a very fluid and organic document. So I do outline, but I don't adhere to it very, very strictly necessarily. I hope that answers the craft question.
Definitely. So the next Roland Blaine was a friend of Dorothy's. Was he ever part of the Algonquin Circle?
I didn't catch the question. I heard something about an artist friend of Dorothy's, but
It's
was there a name there? It just cut out.
Mahlon Blaine.
No. I don't know.
Okay.
That's not a known name to me. I don't recall seeing it in one of her biographies. All right.
Okay, I'm going to bring Jen up. That's okay. And Jen's going to ask some questions.
Ellen, we have questions that were submitted ahead of time on the site, so I'm just going to shoot one. I'm going to shoot one of these questions over to you that somebody entered ahead of time. One of them is from Jerry Victory in Chicago. He says, I enjoyed the book, left no room for a sequel, or did you?
Oh, that's a really good question. No, I did not leave for a sequel. I was not thinking about a sequel when I was writing the book. I intended it to be a standalone. So the new Dorothy Parker book that I'm writing, and that's actually an excellent question. You read that book and you say to yourself, how could she possibly write another Dorothy Parker book? That thing ended. But what I'm actually writing, it's more or less a prequel. It is a standalone book. You don't have one to read the other and to understand it and for it to make sense. It does take place actually before the action of Farewell Dorothy Parker, because I was so definitive in my ending there and didn't leave myself room for resurrecting Dorothy Parker again. So I am writing the new book as a prequel, not a sequel. Although what I tend to call it is a follow-up book, only because it really isn't, it's not a progressive story. You don't need to read one and then the other. They're both, will be standalone books. But that's an excellent question.
Good. And we'll pull one more down here before we run out of time. Let's see. This is from Robin Slick in Philadelphia, and they say, I love Delaney's dialogue in the book. Do you consciously make her Dorothy Jr.?
Okay, I didn't get that at all. Can you repeat it, Jen? I didn't hear the question at all.
It's I love
If Tom
Delaney's.
hears it, if you could type it in the box, because you're cut out.
I'll try one more time. I love Delaney's dialogue in the book. Do you consciously make her Dorothy Jr.?
Oh, okay. The question was that I consciously make Delaney Dorothy Jr. I did want to have another character. I fell in love with this kid. Let's just put it that way. And some of the spirit of Dorothy Parker for me sort of, found her way into this darling girl's character. I wasn't conscious of trying to say, oh well, the Dorothy Parker, but I did want another sort of strong, smart, sassy character. Especially this was a kid who was going to need some strength to deal with the things that she had to deal with in this life. She had quite a lot to deal with. So and just while I'm talking about Delaney and her problems, without really issuing any spoilers for those who haven't read the book, a point I want to make as far as my philosophy about novels is, I don't like to read novels where there isn't a lot at stake for the main character. So I certainly don't like to write where there isn't a lot at stake for the main character. So that's why I have that, storyline with Delaney, and it was something that, I hoped would touch people, and I hoped would be an emotional story, and, created characters that the reader could care about. And, so I've gotten some very good feedback to the main storyline involving Violet, the film critic, and her orphan niece Delaney.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like we are coming close to our ending time here. So I want to let everyone know you can still order Parker. You got that right here on this screen. On the books button, and then Ellen will sign and personalize that for you in your name, and her indie bookshop, the Dolphin Bookshop, will ship that right to your door. And you can do that until 12 a.m. tomorrow night, and all those books will be signed by her. And I want to thank Ellen and Kevin very much for joining us tonight, and everyone else out there who's watching right now. Thank you very much, and I will shoot it back to Tom.
You, Alan, and thank you. Appreciate everyone's patience throughout the technical difficulty there we had at the beginning, but I'm really glad we got to answer everyone's questions here, and Ellen had a chance to connect with you all. So thanks everyone. Have a great night, and as Jen said, click on the book cover there in the upper right hand corner to order your signed copy. Thanks everyone, and bye bye.